The jet jolted so violently at 34,000 feet that people thought the wings might snap. Drinks flew, oxygen masks dropped, and the cabin erupted into pure panic. Up front, both pilots suddenly slumped over, out cold. The aircraft, a full-size passenger jet, rolled sharply and began to fall with no one controlling it. And in the middle of all that chaos, crying adults, falling luggage, alarms, screaming, sat an 11-year-old girl in seat 22F, her feet not even touching the floor, the only person on board who understood exactly what was happening. Moments earlier, everyone had smiled at her like she was just a kid. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, comment below and tell me which country you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more true heart-pounding stories. Just an hour before everything fell apart, Flight 782 had lifted off smoothly from Ridgeview City Airport, heading toward Pacific Bay. It was supposed to be a calm early evening trip, families chatting, business travelers typing away, kids watching cartoons on tablets. In seat 22F, the young girl, Leia Anderson, sat quietly by the window with a faded purple hoodie and a tiny backpack filled with stickers and snacks. To the passengers around her, she looked like any shy kid traveling alone for the first time. A flight attendant even bent down with a bright smile. "First time flying solo, sweetheart?" "Yes, ma'am," Leia answered softly. The attendant nodded slowly, speaking to her as if she were fragile glass. "If you need anything at all, just press this little button right here." "Okay." People smiled at Leia, some even giving her encouraging thumbs-ups. No one gave her a second thought. Why would they? She was just a quiet 11-year-old, with big eyes and small hands. Certainly not someone anyone imagined would matter in a life-or-death moment. But above them, hidden behind a locked cockpit door, things were already beginning to go wrong. And soon the world would discover that the smallest passenger on board was carrying knowledge far beyond her years. While the passengers around her scrolled through phones and flipped pages of magazines, Leia Anderson was calmly watching the clouds, doing something she had done hundreds of times before. Not on real planes, but in a basement apartment filled with old flight manuals, simulator screens, and the smell of her grandfather's pipe tobacco. For 3 years, Leia had been trained by the one man who believed children should understand more than adults expect. Captain Henry Cole, a retired Air Force pilot turned commercial captain. When he moved in with Leia's family after retiring, he didn't just become her babysitter, he became her mentor. "Grandpa, why do I have to learn this stuff?" she had asked once, surrounded by charts, diagrams, and blinking screens. "Because, kiddo," he said, tightening a simulator knob with steady hands, "the world doesn't always wait for adults to save it. Knowledge keeps you alive." Her mother used to protest. "She's only a child. Dad, she doesn't need cockpit training." But Henry would shake his head gently. "I'm not teaching her to fly for fun. I'm teaching her how to think, how to stay calm, how to survive." And so Leia learned. While other kids played soccer, she practiced reading a little. While they memorized math drills, she memorized emergency checklists. While they dreamed of cartoon heroes, she practiced landing procedures in a high-end simulator Henry bought with his retirement savings. What if an engine fails? He'd quiz, maintain glide speed, find a safe landing area. She'd answer instantly. What if pressure drops? Mask on first, then help others. Descend to 10,000 feet. Night after night, she trained, not as a pilot. Her grandpa made that very clear, but as someone who understood the language of emergencies, Leia never imagined she would actually need those lessons. But now, seated in 22F, feeling the plane tremble harder than normal turbulence, her grandfather's voice echoed through her mind. Stay calm, assess, act. Because the things she learned weren't just theories anymore. They were about to become the difference between life and disaster that up ahead in the cockpit. Captain Raymond Hall and First Officer Nina Park were busy watching a weather line forming on their radar. They'd flown together for months. Steady, confident, a smooth team, nothing unusual, nothing alarming. But then, one of the screens blinked. Just once. Na frowned. "Ray, did you see that?" The nav display just flickered. Ray glanced over. Everything looked normal again. Probably a glitch. Keep an eye on it. But 60 seconds later, the entire front panel shimmered like a bad TV signal. And then, beep beep beep. The autopilot disconnected with a harsh warning tone. What on? Ray grabbed the controls. The jet suddenly rolled to the right like an invisible hand was pulling it. "I've got it," he said, wrestling the yoke. But something was off. The controls felt mushy, slow, heavy. "This isn't responding right." "Nah," scanned her display. "Ray hydraulic system adjust dropped to 0. Then another light blinked red. "System B is fluctuating." The entire cockpit lit up like a warning tree. Back in the cabin, passengers felt the sudden lurch. Gasps rippled through the rows. A few drinks spilled. A suitcase rattled loose above someone's head. Ila's eyes shot up from her book. That was not turbulence. That was control, loss. Up front, things got worse fast. System B just failed. "Nah," shouted. "We're down to the last backup." Ray reached for the radio, declaring an aim. He never finished. The jet pitched violently nose down. Both pilots slammed forward into the panel. NA collapsed first. Motionless, Ray tried to lift himself back up, but his vision blurred into darkness. Within seconds, both pilots were unconscious. The aircraft was now diving, twisting, losing altitude. Passengers screamed. Oxygen masks dropped. Lights flickered. Leia grabbed her armrests as her heart thumped wildly, but her mind stayed razor clear. Her grandfather's voice echoed. In an emergency, panic wastes time. Look, think, act. A flight attendant fought her way to the cockpit, flung the door open, and staggered back in horror. The pilots weren't flying the plane. No one was. Is anyone here a pilot? She screamed into the chaos. Anyone with flying experience? No answer. No one knew what to do. But in seat 2F, with small hands and a pounding heart, one person did. The cabin had become pure chaos. People crying, praying, gripping their seats as the jet continued to drop. Bags tumbled from overhead bins. The floor tilted sharply. Every alarm in the aircraft wailed like a warning. No one knew how to answer. Flight attendant Marissa Lane clung to the headrests as she shouted again, her voice cracking. Please, is anyone a pilot? Anyone with flight training? A man in business class raised a shaky hand. I flew small planes 20 years ago, but I come with me, Marissa begged. Leia felt her pulse hammering in her ears. She was just a kid, 11. Who would believe her? Who would even let her near that cockpit? But then she remembered her grandfather's voice. If you know how to help and others don't, you step up. She unbuckled. Her legs trembled as she stood, gripping the seatbacks for balance. Excuse me, she called out, but her voice barely carried over the screams. She tried again, louder. Excuse me, Marissa turned breathless, hair disheveled. Sweetheart, sit down. Put your mask on. I can help, Leia said, forcing her voice to stay steady. I know how to fly. A few passengers stared at her, some with pity, others with disbelief. To them, she was a frightened little girl caught in a nightmare. The man from business class, holding onto the cockpit doorframe, looked back at her. Kid, this isn't the time for games. Real lives. I'm not playing. Leia cut in her words, sharp and clear. My grandfather was Captain Henry Cole, Air Force commercial pilot. He trained me for emergencies. I know the instruments. I know the systems. Please let me try. Marissa froze. There was fear in the girl's eyes. Yes, but underneath it, something else. Certainty, recognition, training. How old are you? Marissa breathed. 11, Leia answered. But I know what I'm doing more than anyone else here. The aircraft dropped again with a violent jolt. People screamed. A drink cart rolled sideways. They had minutes, maybe less. The man shook his head. This is insane. We can't trust. Another deep shudder cut him off. The angle worsened. The oxygen masks swung like pendulums. Time was gone. Marissa made the decision no one else dared to make. Both of you, she said, voice trembling. Come with me now. As Leia moved forward, the passengers stared, some whispering, some crying, realizing the terrifying truth. Their only chance of survival might be an 11-year-old girl in a purple hoodie. The cockpit was a storm of alarms. Red lights pulsing, warning tones echoing. Screens glit. Both pilots were slumped over their controls, breathing but completely unconscious. Papers, checklists, and loose items slid across the tilted floor. Leia stepped inside, her eyes wide, but not frozen. She had seen setups like this before, not real ones, but in her grandfather's simulator night after night. She climbed into the first officer's seat, her feet barely touching the rudder pedals. Her small hands shook, but she forced them steady as she scanned the panel. Altitude 18,000 and dropping. She read aloud. Descent rate 3,000 feet per minute. Airspeed climbing too fast. The man behind her, Mr. Carter, stared in disbelief. You can really read all that. Yes, Leia said, already reaching for the throttle. We're in an uncontrolled descent. Multiple system failures. I need to slow the fall. She grabbed the yoke. It felt wrong instantly. Loose, heavy, barely connected, no hydraulics. She muttered. We're in manual reversion. Marissa gripped the doorway, eyes full of terror. Can you... whispered, exhausted. Then Carter looked ahead through the windshield. I see it. Santa Mesa. The city lights. The airport is ahead. La forced her blurry eyes to focus. Now the real danger began. We have to descend, she said, and set up for landing. Can you land a jet? Carter asked. I've only done it in a simulator. Carter's face went pale. But I have to try, Leia said softly. There's no one else. She eased the throttle back. The engine softened. The nose dipped too fast. She corrected again, adjusting power and pitch until they were descending steadily. Altitude 10,000. Carter called, we're coming down too fast. I've got it, Leia said. The lights of the city stretched beneath them. Gold, white, scattered like stars fallen to earth. She searched for the runway pattern, her heart pounding. There. She pointed. I see it, northwest side. Her relief lasted only a second because now she had to take a crippled jet with no hydraulics, barely any control, and a cabin full of terrified people and put it safely on the ground. For the landing, she whispered to Carter, I'll need every ounce of strength I have left, and yours, too. The plane dropped lower. The runway grew larger. The lights of Santa Mesa International stretched out below them. 2 long runways cutting across the glowing city like silver blades. Hila's heart pounded as she scanned everything she could see through the windshield. "This is it," she said softly. "We only get one chance." "Altitude 7,000. Carter called out, voice shaking. Leia wiped her sweaty palms on her hoodie and tightened her grip on the yoke. Her arms trembled violently. She had been fighting the controls for nearly 40 minutes. Every muscle felt shredded. "We need to come in from the north," she said. "The wind is blowing toward us. See the flags down there? Landing into the wind gives us more control." Carter nodded, though he barely understood. "Just tell me when to help." Leia banked left slowly. Slowly, the aircraft resisting like a stubborn animal. Her small arms shook under the weight, but she kept pulling. Altitude 5,000. The jet swung around in a wide arc and lined up with the runway. "There it is," Carter whispered. "Straight ahead." Leia swallowed hard. It looked impossibly narrow. Impossible for someone her size to reach. "Okay," she said. "Marissa, tell everyone to fasten their belts. This is going to be rough." Marissa dashed back to the cabin, shouting instructions, bracing passengers for impact. Leia grabbed the landing gear lever. "Please. Please," she whispered. She pulled it down. A grinding noise shuddered through the plane. Then thunk. Carter gasped at the lights. 3. Green. Gear down and locked. Yala let out a shaky exhale. Good. Altitude 30,000. Airspeed too high. "I know." She pulled the throttles almost too idle. The engines quieted. The nose dipped. Altitude 2,000. Still fast. Yella focused everything she had left. Her arms felt like they were on fire, but she forced the yoke back a little, steadying their descent. The runway was rushing toward them, long, bright, and terrifying. "Carter," she said, "when I say pull, you help me with everything you've got. We have to flare before we touch down. If we don't, we hit nose first." He nodded, sweat running down his face. "Altitude." Passengers in the cabin sobbed and prayed as the ground filled the windows. "Altitude 500. Ila's breath shook. 300. Coming in fast." She tightened her grip. "Get ready." Altitude 200. Pull. Both Yella and Carter yanked back on the yokes with every ounce of strength they had. The nose slowly, painfully lifted. "Hold it," Yella cried. The plane dropped. Wham! The main wheels slammed into the runway so hard, the entire aircraft bounced back into the air. People screamed. The cabin shook violently. Lala didn't let go. Hold it, she shouted. They hit again. Thud. This time they stayed down, but they were moving way too fast. Brakes, Leia yelled, pushing the pedals with all her weight. Her legs barely reached, but she shoved against them fiercely. The tires screeched. Smoke blasted from the landing gear. Speed, still high. Carter yelled, "We're not slowing enough." The runway, and raced toward them. Hundreds of feet left, then 100, then 50. "Come on, stop," Leia screamed, standing up in her seat for more pressure. The plane shuddered violently. 80 knots, 60, 40, then silence. The jet rolled to a full stop just a few hundred feet from the end of the runway. Isla's hand slipped off the controls. Her arms collapsed at her sides, completely numb. Carter let out a shaky laugh that dissolved into tears. Marissa burst into the cockpit, crying openly. "You did it," she sobbed. You did it." Leia could barely whisper. "Is everyone okay?" "Yes." Marissa choked out. "Yes, you saved them. All of them." Outside sirens blared. Emergency vehicles swarmed the aircraft. Passengers erupted into applause, cheers, sobs of relief. The world had no idea yet, but an 11-year-old girl had just landed a failing airliner with nothing but courage, instinct, and a grandfather's training. And she had saved 147 lives. The cockpit door opened and a rush of cold night air swept in as emergency crews climbed aboard. Paramedics hurried to the front, gently lifting the unconscious pilots out of their seats. They were breathing, stable, just injured. They would recover, but everyone on that jet knew the truth. They were alive because of her. Leia sat slumped in the first officer's seat, her tiny hands still trembling from exhaustion. She couldn't feel her arms, could barely lift her head. She looked like a kid who had just finished a long day at school, not someone who had just saved an entire airliner. "Come on, sweetheart," a paramedic said softly, helping her up. "Let's get you checked out." As she stepped into the cabin, every passenger stared at her in stunned silence. Then one person started clapping, then another, and within seconds, the entire cabin erupted into cheers and applause. People crying as they reached out to touch her shoulder or whisper, "Thank you. You saved my family." A woman sobbed. "You're a hero," a man said, voice shaking. Leia felt overwhelmed, almost embarrassed. She just wanted her grandpa. She wanted her mom. She wanted to stop shaking. Outside the plane, flashing lights lit up the tarmac. Fire trucks, ambulances, airport staff, reporters, a crowd was already forming. News helicopters circled above, their spotlights sweeping the runway like search beams. A stern woman in a navy blazer approached. Evelyn Sharp, an investigator from the National Flight Authority. "Are you Leia Anderson?" she asked. Yella nodded nervously. Evelyn knelt down, so they were eye level. Her serious expression softened. "What you did today was remarkable. We need to understand everything that happened. But first, your family is on the way." Leia's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Can I see them? Please." "They're being rushed here now," Evelyn said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "And Leia, you saved 147 people today. Do you understand that?" Leia shook her head. "I just did what Grandpa taught me." Hours later, her parents ran toward her across the terminal, her mother crying before she even reached her. Leia fell into their arms, finally letting go, sobbing into her mother's shoulder. Then her grandfather, Captain Henry Cole, arrived. He didn't rush. He didn't cry. He simply knelt in front of her, took her hands in his weathered ones, and whispered, "Kiddo, I am so proud of you, but I pray you never have to do something like that again." Illa hugged him tightly. "Me too, Grandpa. Me too." By morning, the story had spread across the world. 11-year-old girl lands crippled passenger jet. Child hero saves 147 lives. Youngest person to ever take control of a commercial aircraft. Experts debated the situation. Aviation forums exploded. News anchors replayed the story on loop. Some people praised her courage. Some doubted it was possible, but the investigators confirmed every detail. The electrical fault, the hydraulic failure, the unconscious pilots, the manual reversion landing, and the child who took the controls. Awards poured in. Letters, invitations, media requests, global recognition. Through it all, Leia stayed quiet, shy, humble. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a kid who had been given a chance to help and took it. But the world would never forget her name. And this was only the beginning of how her story would change lives. 1 year later, Leia stood behind a podium in a crowded auditorium filled with pilots, aviation students, safety experts, and journalists. Cameras flashed. People murmured with anticipation. She adjusted the microphone with small, nervous hands. "A year ago," she began softly, "I was just a regular kid who liked drawing and riding my bike. I never thought I'd sit in a real cockpit or that people would call me a hero." The room fell silent. She glanced toward the front row where her grandfather, Captain Henry Cole, sat watching her with quiet pride. "I wasn't brave because I wasn't scared." Leia continued, "I was terrified. My arms hurt so much, I wanted to stop. I wanted to cry, but my grandfather taught me something important. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about helping anyway. When people need you, and you know something that can make a difference, you try your best. Even if you feel small." A ripple of emotion moved through the audience. "I didn't land that plane because I wanted attention," she said. "I did it because 147 people needed help, and because one man, my grandpa, believed in teaching me things that mattered." She looked at him again, her voice trembling with gratitude. "He taught me that knowledge is a gift, that preparation saves lives, and that anyone, no matter their age, can help someone else." The audience erupted into applause, rising to their feet. Leia stepped back shyly, cheeks red, overwhelmed by the sound. That evening, she and her grandfather sat on the